Hello everyone, welcome to Acme Education. I'm Ritu Gaur. Um, just a disclaimer before I start the video. For detailed explanation of each and every chapter, please join Acme Education. I'm going to link the address and the phone number in the description box. This is just the summary of each and every chapter. I'm going to put these videos on a weekly basis. Today we are, without any further delay, let's get into the video. We'll start from the first chapter of 11th GSEB, that is Nature, Purpose and Scope of Business. The first thing is, what do you mean by an economic activity? So economic activity means an activity which is carried out with the objective of economic benefit or monetary consideration. An example of which can be like if a farmer is producing food grains and he's selling it into in the market, then he's doing an economic activity. Similarly, if a weaver is manufacturing clothes and he's selling those clothes in the industry, in the market, then he's doing an economic activity. A carpenter who's manufacturing furniture and he's selling the furniture in the market, he's earning from that, he's doing an economic activity. Basically, behind the economic activity, the motive is to earn money. So a person who is earning salary, a person who is earning wages, a person who is giving his service and earning money in return is known to be as doing an economic activity. Moving to the next slide, what do you mean by a non-economic activity? So a non-economic activity, a person in the society is performing these kind of activities without the objective of monetary consideration or the gain. Actually, the objective behind doing a non-economic activity is not to earn money, but to do any kind of a social service. Examples can be a social service which is carried on by the social worker, a nursing activity by the mother for her children, working as a volunteer in any kind of a flood or tsunami or earthquake or etc. Moving to the next slide, that what is the main difference between economic activity and the non-economic activity? So we start with the first difference, which is objective. The difference, when you're doing an economic activity, your motive is to get some economic benefit, that is monetary return. But when you're doing a non-economic activity, your motive is to do any kind of a social service or a human service or a service to the country. The second difference can be from the point of view of the expectation. So when you're doing an economic activity, you expect either salary in return or profit in return or fees in return, or you want to maximize your wealth. But when you're doing a non-economic activity, your motive can be your expectation is basically just to serve the country or the society. The next is the type. So in case of an economic activity, there are various different types, like there can be business, there can be profession, there can be employment. What is business, what is profession and employment, that we'll be doing it in the next slides. Whereas in case of a non-economic activity, there are no types. Lastly, coming to the risk and uncertainty involved in case of economic activity, yes, there is a lot of risk and uncertainty because you are expecting money in return, whereas on a contrary, when it comes to non-economic activity, there is no risk or return. Moving to the next slide, that is what you mean by business. So to start with, the meaning of business can be, business means any legal economic activity which is done with the motive of profit. So when you're doing an economic activity, your motive is to earn monetary return. But when you're doing business, your motive specifically is to earn profit in return. Moving to the characteristics of the business, the first is objective of the profit. So when you're doing business, your main motive behind doing business is to earn profit, that which is in the monetary terms. Now, what is profit? Profit is basically the difference between your cost price and your selling price. So if I'm making a product which is of 10 rupees, and if I'm selling that product in the market for 15 rupees, then the difference between this 10 rupees of the cost that I'm making it and the 15 rupees that I'm selling it in the market is basically my profit. The second characteristics is the exchange of goods and services. When you are doing business, your motive behind doing the business is to earn profit, and you need to exchange any kind of a commodity that is good, or you have to give some service to earn profit in return. So for example, like if a manufacturer of a furniture, okay, for him the good can be the furniture, he sells that into the market, in return he earns money. Similarly, a teacher who's giving a service of providing teaching, and in return she's getting the fees, and that is why she's termed as doing an economic act, doing a business. The next is risk and uncertainty. So what do you mean by risk to start with? Risk can be classified into two categories. One is natural risk, whereas the other is man-made risk. What do you mean by natural risk? Natural risk is that risk which occurs basically naturally, like earthquake, tsunami, flood, etc. Whereas man-made risk is the risk which is created by man, which can be in the form of theft or fire or any kind of an accident. Now, what do you mean by uncertainty? Uncertainty can be of when a person opens up a shop in the morning, or when a doctor goes to his clinic, they don't know how much they are going to earn at the end of the day, or at the end of the month, or at the end of the year. So how much profit or how much loss is going to be occurred in the business, that is uncertainty. Moving to the next one, which is called as creation of utility. Utility can be created in three forms. The first is called as form utility, the second is called as place utility, and the third is called as time utility. So when a person is doing business and he's selling the particular product at a perfect time in the market, he's termed as doing the time utility. The place where the goods are most in demand, and when a businessman is selling the goods at that particular place, he's said to be doing a place utility. And lastly, form utility means that when you convert the wood into a furniture like a table or a chair, that means that you are basically creating a form utility. Moving to the next characteristics, which is called as continuance of the activity. Now, when you're doing a business, it should be on a continuous basis, on a regular basis. And if one-time activity performed by a person is not termed as doing business, so it has to be on a regular, on a continuous basis. The next is a requirement of the money. So when you do the business, when you have to start the business, you need money. When you want to expand your business, you need money. When you have to end your business, you need money. So money is basically the lifeblood of the business. It is needed at each and every stage of the business. Moving ahead to the last characteristics, which is called as economic activity. Yes, business is an economic activity, because when you do business, you earn money in that which is in form of the profit. Moving to the next topic, and that is the objective of business. So when you are doing business, there are certain objectives. If you see the chart, there are two specific objectives flashing on the screen. One is the economic objective, whereas the other is a social objective. The economic objective means to earn money, and that is why it is divided into three parts, that is profit, maximization of wealth, and other objectives. And the social objective can be divided in various categories, like social responsibility, providing employment opportunities, providing good quality of the goods and services, adapting a fair trade price, and other, etc. So I'll start from the first topic, that is economic objective, which includes profit. So as I've already discussed previously, profit is nothing but the difference between the cost price and the selling price. And profit is the lifeblood of the business, because if there is no profit, the business will not be able to survive for the long. So profit is an objective of doing business. Second objective can be maximization of the wealth, which means that to increase the quantity of your business, or to expand your business, that is called as maximization of the wealth. And there can be other objectives also, which involves, like maybe you want growth in your business, or maybe you want your name to grow in the business. And that's it. Moving to the next topic, that is social objective, which further includes social responsibility. Now, what do you mean by the word social? Social means society, which means when you're doing a business, you have certain responsibility towards the society. That is to provide them good quality of goods and services, to provide them employment opportunities, to provide them all the information related to the product via advertisement, and to provide them with a better, to maintain better ethics in the business. That is the responsibility of the business towards the society. Similarly, you can also say that, government is a part of the society where you're doing the business, so it becomes the responsibility of the business to pay the taxes on time. and provide all the information of the business to the government which is needed. The second objective can be providing employment opportunities. Now, when you're doing business, you need to provide opportunities to the people who can come and work in the organization as an employee, because of which the people can earn money for them, they can grow, and also the country's problem can be solved of unemployment and it can be reduced. The third is providing good quality of the goods and services. Now, when you're doing business, you need to provide better quality of the goods and services. You should not manipulate the customers and charge a higher price. You should provide them a good quality of the products. The next is adopting a fair trade practice, which means that you have to charge a reasonable price or a reasonable profit from the customers. You cannot exploit them and you cannot charge a very extra amount from them. Moving to the next topic, that is business risk. Now, business risk is divided into two parts. That is, what do you mean by natural risk and what do you mean by man-made risk? As I told you, natural risk is the risk which involves which happens naturally, like earthquake, flood, tsunami, etc. Whereas there can be man-made risk, like the employees going on the strike. Maybe there's a change in the technology. Maybe there's change in the law. Maybe there's change in the demand. So these are the man-made risk. Moving to the next slide, and that is causes of the business risk. Now, what causes the risk to the business? So there can be either change in the technology, like as the era changes, the technology changes, the people need to change. Like today, if you see, a lot of people doing online business in spite of having the physical shops as well. This is basically technology. Next is the threat of the substitute product. Now, what do you mean by substitute product? So substitute product means those products which can be used in place of another one. So like, for example, tea and coffee are substitutes. T-shirt and shirt are substitutes. These are substitute products. Like if you are not getting tea, you can probably go and have coffee. If you're not getting Pepsi, you can probably go and buy Coca-Cola. If you're not getting juice, you can probably go and get coconut water. So these are substitute products. And when you're doing business, if you're selling only one product, then you have a threat that your substitute, if it is sold at a lesser price in the market, people might be buying that product. So yes, there are causes of the business risk as a substitute product as well. Moving to the next category, that is competition. Now, when you're selling one particular brand of a product and there is another person who's selling another brand of the product in the market, there is a competition risk, because there is a lot of people who are selling the similar kind of a product. So you have the risk of competition as well. Next is the legislation, which means the laws which are framed by the government. If the government changes the policies, then you have the risk or the chance that your business might suffer because of it. Next is the uncertainty of the demand, which means that people might demand certain goods in a specific season or at a specific period of time, but then they won't demand certain goods if they are not in need of, or if the fashion changes or the taste of the person changes. So demand basically is the main factor for your business risk, because if people stop demanding product, and if they start demanding something else, then you need to change your business. Moving to the next topic, which is called as physical risk. So physical risk can be in the form of, you can have any kind of an accident or a damage. Physically, your machine can get damaged, because of which, your business can suffer a lockdown for a very long period of time. Moving to the next topic, which is what do you mean by a profession? So profession is basically, let's start with the meaning. A person with the specialized skill, knowledge, training, and professional education renders the services and in return receives the fees is called as profession. So basically, to become a professional person, you need to have specialized skill, you need to have knowledge, you need to have training and professional education, and in return that you receive is called as fees. So there is a certain code of conduct, meaning the rules and regulations which need to be followed when you are into a professional activity. A very good example can be a chartered accountant, a doctor, a lawyer. These are the examples of the professionals. Moving to the next topic, and that is what do you mean? What are the characteristics of the profession? So the first characteristic is you need specialized knowledge, which means that if you want to become chartered accountant, you need to take the chartered accountant degree. If you want to become the lawyer, you need to take a specified degree from a university of law. So you need to have specialized knowledge in your specialized aspect. The next is a fees is provided for doing any kind of a professional service. So when you do professional service, you don't get salary in return, but you get fees in return. The primary objective behind doing any kind of a professional activity is to serve the country. And it is an independent activity, which means that, because you have taken your own degree, you are providing certain service of your own, you are doing an independent activity, you are not dependent on any other person. And there is no relation with the production, because you're into production, you are not into manufacturing of goods and services, but you are into providing your own specialized service to the people. You need to obey certain code of conduct if you are into a professional job, which means that you need to follow certain rules and regulations which are set by the association. And lastly, the monetary return remains uncertain. That is, you don't know how much profit or how much amount you are going to earn, because you are into the profession. You don't know. The doctor doesn't know at the end of the day how much he or she is going to earn. A lawyer doesn't know at the end of the year how much he or she is going to earn. It depends on the number of clients that are coming to the person. Moving to the next topic, and that is employment. So what do you mean by employment? Now, employment means a job. Okay, it is an economic activity which is performed, and in return you receive the fixed salary where the work is assigned as per the contract. So in case of an employment, there is a contract which is created between two people, and those two people are employer and employee. Employer is the person who appoints the employee, and there is a contract which is created between them, and the employee needs to perform all the duties as per that contract. Yes, employment is also an economic activity, because in return you are receiving a fixed salary. Moving ahead to the example, a teacher who is teaching in a school, or maybe a government employee, will be called as doing an employment activity. Moving ahead to the characteristics of the employment. So the first characteristics is that you receive fixed salary, because you have a contract. There are other benefits also apart from the salary, like you can get medical allowances, you can get pension, you can get provident fund, you can get car facilities provided by the company to you, you can get house facility provided by the company. Then there is then they perform the assigned work as per the contract. So what basically an employee is supposed to do, he's supposed to perform the work as per the contract. The qualification, working hour, retirement are predetermined, which means that you need to take specific qualification to become the employee. The working hours are going to be fixed by the contract of the company. The retirement is fixed by the company. Dependent activity, why this is a dependent activity? Because in case of employment, you are going and working in some company, so if the company doesn't exist, you will also not have the job. So it is a dependent activity. You need to be dependent on the contract, you need to be dependent on the company, you need to be dependent on your employer. Next is employer and employee are bound to follow the rules as per the contract. So it is the duty of both the employer as well as the employee to follow the rules and regulations which are set. The capital investment by the employee is not needed, because the employee directly joins the organization, and he is not supposed to do any kind of an investment before joining the job. That's it. Now we move to the next topic, and that is, what is the main difference between business, profession, and employment? So we individually checked out what is business, we checked out what is profession, we checked out what is employment. Now let's see the difference between the all three. Starting with the first difference, that is the nature of work. When you're doing business, you need to supply the goods and services to the customers, and in exchange, you are going to receive money. When you're doing professional, you need to render your service, and in return, you are going to receive fees. When you are doing employment activity, you are supposed to perform your work as per the rules of the contract. Moving to the second point, that is qualification. When you are doing business, it is not essential that you need any specific qualification. When you're doing professional activity, you need to have specialized qualification, you need to have training, you need to have expertise, knowledge. And when you're doing employment, you need qualification as per the requirement of the job that you are into. The third difference is the reward or the return. So when you're doing business, you get profit in return. When you're doing profession, you get fees in return. When you're doing employment, you get salary or wages in return. Moving to the next topic, that is capital. So is there any capital which is needed to start when you do the business? To start with, what do you mean by capital? Capital is the monetary benefit which is given by the owner to the business. So when you do the business, yes, you need capital because you need to buy your place, you need to buy the furniture, in that you need to buy the goods, you need to get a lot of things available for your business. When you are doing a professional activity, there is very limited amount of capital which is needed because you need to have your space, where you can sit and serve your clients. So that space creation will require limited amount of capital. And finally, when you're doing employment, you don't need any capital because you just have to take your bag and go and work in the office which is created by the business or the employer who has put you under the contract. Moving to the next difference, and that is fifth, risk. So when you're doing business, is there any risk involved? So yes, there is going to be a lot of risk. There is going to be natural risk. There is going to be man-made risk, but there is a lot of risk involved when you're doing business. When you're doing profession, again, there is a risk of the non-recipient of the fees. Certain times you serve your clients and then they don't pay you. So there is a little bit risk involved in case of the profession. And lastly, when you're doing employment, there can be a lesser risk because there can be times where the company doesn't pay you the salary, but then at the end you're working with a company on the contract basis. So yes, you are going to be receiving a regular fixed salary, and so you cannot expect that much amount of risk over there. The next point is code of conduct, which means what are the rules and regulations? Are there any rules and regulations that you have to follow when you're doing business? Yes, there are certain legal rules and regulations by the government that you will have to follow. Apart from that, there are no rules. When you're doing a professional activity, there are a lot of rules and regulations which are by the specific prescribed respective professional association. Like, for example, a chartered accountant needs to follow all the rules and regulations set by the association of the CAs. Similarly, the lawyers need to follow all the rules and regulations which are associated by the association of the lawyers. Now, when you're doing when you're doing employment activity, there are set of rules and regulations which are made by the company, which are made by the employer-employee relationship on a contract basis, and you need to follow that. Moving to the next topic, and that is transfer of ownership. If you have a business, can you transfer it to someone else? So yes, the business can be transferred to someone else. If you are into a professional activity, can you transfer your degree to someone else? No, the answer is no, because a degree cannot be transferred to any other person. And lastly, when you are into job, again, it is your contract with your employer, so you cannot transfer that job to some other person. That's it. Now we move to the next topic, and that is, what do you mean by trade? To start with, the meaning of the trade is exchange of the commodity or the service in return of the commodity or the service. So trade is basically buying and selling of the commodities, not manufacturing of the commodity. So like, if there is a manufacturer and if there is a wholesaler, the wholesaler buys the goods from the manufacturer and further the wholesaler sells those goods to the customer. So he's just a mediator in between, and this is basically called as trading. Moving ahead to an example, like when you purchase a book from the shopkeeper, you are basically going for a trade activity because you are going to give him the money and he's going to give you the books. Moving ahead to what do you mean by rather, what are the characteristics of trade? So the first characteristics of the trade will be that it is an economic activity because there is a transaction of the money involved in the trade. There are always two parties when it comes to the trade. One is the buyer, one is the seller. The exchange that is happening between the buyer and the seller is very much necessary. There is a transfer of the ownership because when the seller is selling the particular commodity to the buyer pays him the money, and so the commodity which is right now in the name of seller, when he sells it to the buyer, it becomes of the buyer, and so the ownership from the seller passes on to the buyer. The next is, again, trading is a continuous activity, is not just a one-time activity. And next is, the value of the goods or the services are determined in the terms of money. So when you're trading happens in the monetary terms. So basically the seller is selling a particular commodity to the buyer, which is measured in the terms of money. Lastly, it is a legal activity because it is allowed to trade, but then there are certain commodities which are not allowed to trade. So if you're trading under those commodities, then it is not legal. Moving ahead to the flow chart, which says that the trade can be divided into two parts: internal trade and international trade. What do you mean by internal trade? Internal trade means that trade which is within the geographical boundaries of the country, which can be further divided into two parts as wholesale trade and retail trade. Wholesale trade means that trade which is done in the bulk, whereas retail trade is done in the smaller quantities. Now moving to the international trade, which means the trade which is happening outside the boundaries of the country. A very good example I'll give you, like if India is trading with US, this is called as international trade. So international trade is also classified into three types, if you can see: import, export, and re-export. What do you mean by import? When you are buying the goods from the other country, so like if India is buying the goods from US, this is called as import. Similarly, if India is selling the goods to US, this is called as export. And if, for example, India buys the goods from US and then sells it to UK, this is called as re-export, because we are buying first and then we are further forwarding it to some other country. So we are re-exporting. We are buying, importing also, and exporting also. Moving to the next topic, that is commerce. What do you mean by commerce? So commerce means the trade and the auxiliary services to trade. These services will include services like banking, insurance, transportation, communication, warehousing, etc. Commerce can also be termed as the auxiliaries to trade, because when you are trading, you need certain services, like you need banking facility, you need communication facilities, you need insurance, you need warehousing to store your goods. All of these services basically become a part of commerce. Now we move to the characteristics of the commerce. So firstly, trading is a part of commerce, because trading is including the commerce. Second is economic activity. Again, when you are providing any kind of service, you're getting money in return, so you're doing an economic activity. Third, it increases the time and place utility, because commerce, all the auxiliaries to trading in the commerce basically helps the people to get the goods and services at a convenient time, at their convenient place. Commerce is basically quite a demand-oriented concept, because if people are demanding goods, then only the goods will be transported, then only the goods will be made and stored it in the warehouse, then only people will be keeping their money in the banks. So it is quite a demand-oriented concept. Moving ahead to the difference between trade and commerce. Now, the first difference can be that trading basically is the exchange of goods and the services, and in return you get money. Whereas in commerce, it includes the auxiliaries to services, that is all the kind of services which are needed to trade are included in the commerce. The second difference will be scope. So your trading scope is quite limited, because it involves only the exchange of goods and services, whereas commerce is a wider scope, because trading is a part of commerce. Trading is included in commerce, and that is why it can be termed as a wider concept. The next will be parties. So how many parties are involved in trade? So there are two parties, and both the parties generally know each other, because both of them are into buying and selling. Whereas in case of commerce, both the parties may be at a distant place, that is, they may be far away, and still, they can use these auxiliary services. Moving to the next topic, and that is industry. So industry can be classified into three categories, namely the primary industry, secondary industry, and tertiary industry. What do you mean by primary industry? An industry which involves all the kind of agriculture based services, like animal husbandry, poultry farming, dairy, fishery. All of this forms a part of the primary industry. What do you mean by a secondary industry? It involves converting the raw material into a finished good. So like if you are converting a cocoa plant into a chocolate, you are into a secondary industry. When you are converting a wood into a table or a chair, you are into a secondary industry. Moving to tertiary industry, so this is that industry which basically involves all the kind of services, like again banking, transportation, communication, warehousing, insurance, etc. I'll give you an example which will help you to connect all the three industries together. So let's say we have sugar, which is being rather sugar cane, which is being grown in the agriculture sector. We take the sugar cane from the agriculture sector, which is a primary industry, and we convert it into sugar. Okay, from the sugar cane we convert it into sugar. This process happens in the secondary industry, and when that particular sugar is marketed or advertised, and it is transported from the manufacturer to the consumer, this process is basically the tertiary industries topic. So every product goes through three different industries, that is primary, secondary, and tertiary. You can have tons of different examples. And That's it. Thank you so much. If you have any doubt, you can definitely contact, and you can also for detailed explanation of each and every chapter, you can please visit to our address, and you can contact. And that's it. Enjoy the rest of your day. Have fun.